Welcome to Toxic from Reddit, where real toxic relationship stories come to life. Here you'll hear true stories from people who experience toxic relationships from different perspectives. Partners dealing with cheating, manipulation, gaslighting, red flags, and all the emotional chaos that comes with loving someone who hurts you. Stories of betrayal, of finding strength to leave, of discovering the truth, of heartbreak, of healing, and the raw reality of toxic love. This is a real story, shared anonymously on Reddit. Some details have been changed to protect the identity of the people involved. Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer. I'm 33 years old and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I need to tell you about the most bizarre and devastating situation that has completely destroyed my marriage and my relationship with my in-laws, which is that 2 months ago, my mother-in-law hired a private investigator to follow me around and gather evidence that I was cheating on her son. She was convinced that I was having an affair, and she wanted proof so that her son would divorce me. But the private investigator ended up discovering that it was actually her son, my husband, who was having an affair with his coworker. And now I'm dealing with the aftermath of this discovery, the betrayal of my husband cheating on me, the humiliation of knowing that my mother-in-law suspected me of infidelity when I had been completely faithful, and the complicated dynamics of my mother-in-law now trying to apologize to me while also trying to defend her son's actions. I'm going to tell you this entire story from the beginning, because it's incredibly complicated and involves years of tension with my mother-in-law, a marriage that I thought was solid, and a betrayal that I never saw coming. My husband's name is Brandon. He's 35 years old and we've been married for 7 years, together for 9 years total. My mother-in-law's name is Patricia. She's 62 years old, and she has never liked me from the moment Brandon introduced me to her. Brandon and I met 10 years ago through mutual friends, and we hit it off immediately. Brandon was charming and funny and ambitious, and I was attracted to his confidence and his drive. We started dating, and the relationship progressed quickly, and within a year, Brandon was talking about marriage and our future together. About 6 months into our relationship, Brandon introduced me to his family, and that's when I met Patricia. From the very first meeting, I could tell that Patricia did not approve of me. Like she was cold and distant. She asked me invasive questions about my background and my family, and she made subtle comments that made it clear she didn't think I was good enough for her son. After that first meeting, Brandon told me not to take Patricia's behavior personally, and he said that his mother was very protective of him and that she would warm up to me eventually. But Patricia never warmed up to me, and over the years her hostility toward me only intensified. Patricia would make comments about my appearance, my career, my family, and my abilities as a partner to Brandon. She would say things like, "Brandon, are you sure Jennifer is the right person for you?" Or, "I just want you to be happy, and I'm not sure Jennifer can give you the life you deserve." Patricia would also try to interfere in our relationship. Like she would call Brandon constantly. She would show up at our apartment unannounced. She would try to plan activities for Brandon that excluded me, and she would make it clear that she wished Brandon was with someone else. I tried to be patient and understanding, and I tried to build a relationship with Patricia, but nothing I did was ever good enough for her. I would invite Patricia to lunch. I would buy her thoughtful gifts. I would include her in our plans, and I would try to have conversations with her, but she would always be cold and dismissive toward me. Brandon was aware of his mother's behavior, but he never really stood up to her or set boundaries with her, like he would tell me that's just how she is. Or she means well. She's just worried about me. I felt frustrated that Brandon wouldn't defend me or tell his mother that her behavior was unacceptable, but I also didn't want to create more conflict, so I tried to just tolerate Patricia's hostility and focus on my relationship with Brandon. Despite the issues with Patricia, my relationship with Brandon seemed solid, and after 2 years of dating, Brandon proposed to me, and I said yes. When we told Patricia about our engagement, she did not react well. Like she didn't congratulate us, she didn't seem happy, and she actually said to Brandon, "Are you sure you want to do this? You're so young, maybe you should wait." Brandon told his mother that he was sure and that he loved me and that we were getting married whether she approved or not, and Patricia reluctantly accepted it, although she made it clear that she was not happy about it. The wedding planning process was a nightmare because Patricia tried to control every aspect of the wedding. Like she had opinions about the venue, the guest list, the menu, the flowers, my dress, and she would call Brandon constantly to complain about my choices and to try to get him to override my decisions. I tried to include Patricia in the planning process and to consider her opinions, but she was never satisfied, and she made the entire experience stressful and unpleasant. On our wedding day, Patricia wore a white dress, which everyone knows is inappropriate for the mother of the groom, and she made a speech at the reception that was passive-aggressive and included several comments about how she hoped I would take good care of her son and how she would always be there for Brandon if he ever needed her. After we got married, I hoped that Patricia would accept me as part of the family and that our relationship would improve, but instead, it got worse. Patricia would call Brandon multiple times a day. She would guilt trip him into spending time with her. She would criticize me to Brandon, and she would try to create conflict between us. There were several times when Brandon and I would have arguments that were directly caused by something Patricia had said or done, and I started to resent Patricia for interfering in our marriage. I also started to resent Brandon for not setting firmer boundaries with his mother and for allowing her to treat me poorly. About 3 years into our marriage, Brandon got a new job at a marketing firm, and he started working long hours and traveling frequently for work. I was supportive of Brandon's career, and I understood that his job was demanding, but I also started to feel like we were drifting apart. Like we weren't spending as much quality time together, and we weren't communicating as well as we used to. I tried to talk to Brandon about this, and I suggested that we go to couples therapy or that we make more of an effort to prioritize our relationship. But Brandon would always say that he was just busy with work and that things would calm down eventually. Around this same time, Patricia started making comments to Brandon about how I must be lonely with him working so much, and how she wouldn't be surprised if I was spending time with other men. Brandon told me about these comments, and I was furious. Like I couldn't believe that Patricia was accusing me of cheating when I had been nothing but faithful and supportive. I confronted Patricia about her comments, and I told her that it was inappropriate for her to make accusations about me, and Patricia said that she was just looking out for her son and that she had a bad feeling about me. After that confrontation, Patricia and I barely spoke to each other, and the tension between us was at an all-time high. Over the next few years, Patricia continued to make subtle accusations and comments suggesting that I was unfaithful or that I had ulterior motives for being with Brandon. She would say things to Brandon like, "How do you know Jennifer isn't seeing someone else when you're traveling for work?" Or, "I just think it's strange that Jennifer goes out with her friends so much. What is she really doing?" These comments would upset Brandon, and he would sometimes question me about where I had been or who I had been with, and I felt hurt and insulted that he would even entertain his mother's ridiculous accusation. I would reassure Brandon that I was faithful, and that his mother was just trying to create problems in our marriage, and Brandon would apologize and say that he trusted me. But I could tell that Patricia's comments were planting seeds of doubt in his mind. About 4 months ago, I started noticing some changes in Brandon's behavior that concerned me. Brandon became more secretive with his phone, like he would take calls in another room. He would angle his phone away from me when he was texting, and he set a new passcode on his phone that he didn't share with me. Brandon was also coming home later from work, and he was traveling more frequently, and when I would ask him about his day or his trips, he would be vague and evasive. Brandon also became less interested in spending time with me. Like he would come home from work and immediately go to his office or go to the gym, and he stopped initiating physical intimacy with me. I started to feel suspicious that something was going on, but I also felt guilty for being suspicious because I didn't want to be the kind of wife who didn't trust her husband. I tried to talk to Brandon about the changes I was noticing, and I asked him if everything was okay, and Brandon said that he was just stressed about work and that I was being paranoid. I wanted to believe Brandon, so I tried to push my concerns aside, but the nagging feeling that something was wrong wouldn't go away. About 3 months ago, I went to a family dinner at Patricia's house, and during the dinner, Patricia made several pointed comments about faithfulness and trust in marriage, and she kept looking at me while she was making these comments. After dinner, I overheard Patricia talking to Brandon in the kitchen, and she said, "Brandon, I really think you need to find out what Jennifer is doing when you're not around. I have a feeling that she's hiding something from you." I was furious, and I walked into the kitchen and confronted Patricia, and I said, "Patricia, I am so sick of your accusations. I have been nothing but faithful to Brandon, and I don't understand why you're so determined to believe that I'm a bad person." Patricia said, "I'm just trying to protect my son, and I think he deserves to know the truth about who he's married to." I said, "The truth is that I love your son, and I have been a good wife to him, and the only person who's causing problems in our marriage is you." Brandon stepped in and told both of us to calm down, and he said that we needed to stop fighting and that we needed to find a way to get along. I told Brandon that I couldn't keep dealing with his mother's hostility and accusations, and that he needed to set boundaries with her and defend me, and Brandon said that he would talk to his mother. I don't know what Brandon said to Patricia, but after that dinner, Patricia stopped making comments directly to me, although I'm sure she continued to make comments to Brandon in private. About 2 months ago, I was at the grocery store, and I noticed a man who seemed to be following me. I saw the same man at the grocery store, at the coffee shop, at the gym, and outside my office building over the course of several days, and I started to feel very uncomfortable and concerned that I was being stalked. I told Brandon about the man who was following me, and Brandon seemed concerned, and he said that maybe we should report it to the police. But before we could do that, the man approached me in a parking lot, and he introduced himself as a private investigator named Mark, and he said that he needed to talk to me. I was terrified, and I asked Mark why he had been following me, and Mark said that he had been hired by Patricia to investigate me and to gather evidence of infidelity. I was absolutely shocked and furious, and I said, "You've been following me because my mother-in-law thinks I'm cheating on my husband. That's insane. I'm not having an affair." Mark said that he had been following me for 3 weeks, and that he had documented everywhere I went and everyone I interacted with, and that he had found no evidence of any inappropriate behavior or infidelity. Mark said that he felt uncomfortable continuing the investigation because it was clear that I wasn't doing anything wrong, and he said that he thought I deserved to know that I was being investigated. Mark also said that during his investigation, he had noticed some suspicious behavior from Brandon, and that if I wanted, he could look into Brandon's activities instead. I was reeling from this information, and I didn't know what to think or what to do. I asked Mark what kind of suspicious behavior he had noticed from Brandon, and Mark said that he had seen Brandon meeting with a woman multiple times at restaurants and hotels, and that their interactions appeared to be romantic in nature. I felt like I was going to be sick, and I asked Mark if he was sure, and Mark said that he couldn't be certain without doing a more thorough investigation, but that based on what he had observed, it seemed like Brandon might be having an affair. I was devastated and confused, and I didn't know whether to believe Mark or not. But I also knew that Brandon's behavior had been suspicious lately, and that this would explain a lot. I asked Mark if he would be willing to investigate Brandon instead of me, and Mark said that he would, but that he would need to be paid, and that he couldn't tell Patricia about the change in the investigation because she was his client. I agreed to pay Mark out of my own savings, and I asked him to find out the truth about what Brandon was doing. Over the next 2 weeks, Mark investigated Brandon, and he followed Brandon to work, to business trips, and to various locations around Charlotte. Mark documented everything, and he took photos and videos of Brandon's activities. At the end of the 2 weeks, Mark met with me and showed me the evidence he had gathered, and I felt like my world was falling apart. The evidence showed that Brandon was having an affair with a coworker named Ashley, and that they had been seeing each other for at least 6 months. There were photos of Brandon and Ashley having dinner together, holding hands, kissing, and entering and leaving hotels together. There were also text messages that Mark had been able to access that showed explicit conversations between Brandon and Ashley, and conversations about how they needed to be careful so that I wouldn't find out. I was absolutely heartbroken and devastated, and I couldn't believe that Brandon had been cheating on me while his mother was accusing me of being unfaithful. I asked Mark what I should do with this information, and Mark said that was up to me, but that he thought I deserved to know the truth, and that he felt guilty for initially investigating me when I had done nothing wrong. Mark also said that he was going to tell Patricia that he had found no evidence of me cheating, and that he was ending the investigation. I thanked Mark for his honesty and for uncovering the truth about Brandon, and I paid him for his work. After Mark left, I sat in my car and cried for hours, and I tried to process the fact that my husband had been cheating on me and that my marriage was based on lies. I decided that I needed to confront Brandon with the evidence, but I also decided that I wanted to confront Patricia first, because I wanted her to know that she had been wrong about me and that her precious son was the one who had been unfaithful. I called Patricia and asked if I could come over to talk to her, and Patricia agreed, although she sounded suspicious about why I wanted to meet. When I arrived at Patricia's house, she let me in, and we sat down in her living room, and Patricia said, "What do you want to talk about, Jennifer?" I said, "I want to talk about the private investigator you hired to follow me around and prove that I was cheating on Brandon." Patricia's face went pale, and she said, "I don't know what you're talking about." I said, "Don't lie to me, Patricia. The private investigator told me everything. He told me that you hired him to investigate me because you were convinced I was having an affair." Patricia was silent for a moment, and then she said, "Fine. Yes, I hired a private investigator because I know that you're not good enough for my son, and I wanted proof so that Brandon would finally leave you." I said, "Well, the private investigator found no evidence of me cheating because I'm not cheating. I have been completely faithful to Brandon throughout our entire marriage, despite the fact that you've treated me terribly and accused me of being unfaithful for years." Patricia said, "Just because the investigator didn't find anything doesn't mean you're not hiding something." I said, "You're unbelievable. You're so determined to believe that I'm a bad person that you can't even accept the truth when it's right in front of you." And then I said, "But here's the interesting thing, Patricia. While the private investigator was following me around, he noticed some suspicious behavior from Brandon, so I asked him to investigate Brandon instead. And guess what he found?" Patricia looked nervous and she said, "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and showed Patricia the photos and videos that Mark had taken of Brandon and Ashley together. And I said, "Your son, the one you think is so perfect, has been having an affair with his coworker for the past 6 months. Patricia looked at the photos, and her face went through a range of emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, and then denial. Patricia said, "This can't be real. These photos must be fake. Brandon would never do this." I said, "The photos are real, Patricia. And there are also text messages between Brandon and Ashley that are very explicit and leave no doubt about what's been going on." Patricia started crying, and she said, "I don't understand. Brandon is a good man. He wouldn't cheat on you." I said, "Well, he did, and the irony is that while you were so busy accusing me of being unfaithful, your son was actually the one who was cheating." Patricia said, "This is your fault. You must have driven him to this. You must not have been meeting his needs." I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and I said, "Are you seriously blaming me for Brandon's decision to cheat? I have been a loving and supportive wife, and Brandon made the choice to betray me. That's on him, not on me." Patricia said, "Brandon must have had a reason. Men don't just cheat for no reason." I said, "You're delusional, Patricia. You can't accept that your son is capable of doing something wrong, so you're trying to blame me for his actions." I said, "I came here to tell you the truth and to let you know that I'm leaving Brandon, and that you were wrong about me. And I hope you can live with the fact that your accusations and your interference in our marriage contributed to this situation." Patricia started begging me not to leave Brandon, and she said, "Please, Jennifer, don't give up on my son. Every marriage goes through rough patches. You can work through this." I said, "I'm not interested in working through this. Brandon betrayed me, and I deserve better than to be with someone who cheats on me and who doesn't defend me against his mother's attacks." I left Patricia's house and I went home to confront Brandon. When Brandon got home from work that evening, I was waiting for him in the living room with the evidence that Mark had gathered spread out on the coffee table. Brandon walked in and saw the photos, and his face went completely white. Brandon said, "What is this? Where did you get these?" I said, "Your mother hired a private investigator to prove that I was cheating on you, but instead, the investigator discovered that you're the one having an affair." Brandon tried to deny it at first, and he said, "This isn't what it looks like. Ashley and I are just friends." I said, "Don't insult my intelligence, Brandon. I have photos of you kissing her, I have photos of you going into hotels with her, and I have text messages where you're talking about how much you love her and how you need to hide the affair from me." Brandon sat down and put his head in his hands, and he was quiet for a long time, and then he finally admitted it. Brandon said, "Okay, yes, I've been seeing Ashley, but it's not serious, it was just a mistake, I still love you." I said, "You've been having an affair for 6 months, that's not a mistake. That's a choice. You chose to betray me over and over again." Brandon said, "I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I was stressed about work, and Ashley was there, and it just happened." I said, "It didn't just happen. You made a conscious decision to cheat on me, and you've been lying to me for months." I said, "And the worst part is that while you were cheating on me, your mother was accusing me of being unfaithful, and you never fully defended me. You let her plant seeds of doubt in your mind about me, when you were the one who was actually being unfaithful." Brandon said, "I know, I'm so sorry. I should have stood up to my mother, and I should never have cheated on you. Please give me another chance." I said, "I can't, Brandon. You've broken my trust, and I don't think I can ever forgive you for this." Brandon begged me to reconsider, and he said that he would end things with Ashley, and that he would go to therapy, and that he would do whatever it took to save our marriage. But I told Brandon that it was too late, and that I had already contacted a divorce attorney. Brandon broke down crying, and he said that he couldn't lose me, and that he loved me. But I told him that if he really loved me, he wouldn't have cheated on me. I told Brandon that I wanted him to move out of the house, and Brandon reluctantly agreed. Over the next few days, Brandon packed his things and moved into an apartment, and I started the divorce process. The past 2 months have been incredibly difficult, and I've been dealing with a lot of emotions: heartbreak, anger, betrayal, and also a strange sense of vindication because I was right to trust my instincts that something was wrong, and because Patricia's accusations turned out to be projection of what her son was actually doing. Patricia has tried to contact me multiple times since I confronted her, and she sent me long text messages apologizing for hiring the private investigator and for accusing me of cheating. Patricia has said that she was wrong about me, and that she can see now that I was a good wife to Brandon, and that she's sorry for the way she treated me. But Patricia has also tried to defend Brandon's actions, and she's asked me to give him another chance. And she's said that affairs can be overcome, and that I shouldn't throw away my marriage. I haven't responded to Patricia's messages, because I don't think I owe her anything, and because I'm not interested in having a relationship with her anymore. I've been going to therapy to help me process the betrayal and the end of my marriage, and my therapist has been helping me understand that Brandon's cheating was not my fault, and that I deserve to be with someone who respects me and is faithful to me. My therapist has also been helping me work through my anger toward Patricia, and has been helping me understand that Patricia's behavior toward me was abusive and controlling, and that Brandon's failure to set boundaries with his mother was a major problem in our marriage. I've been thinking a lot about the red flags in my marriage that I ignored or minimized, like Brandon's failure to defend me against his mother's attacks, his increasing secrecy and distance, his long work hours and frequent travel, and his defensiveness when I tried to talk to him about my concerns. I've realized that I ignored these red flags because I wanted to believe that my marriage was solid, and because I didn't want to be the kind of person who was suspicious or distrustful. But I've learned that trusting your instincts is important, and that if something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. I've been thinking about how Patricia's accusations were actually a form of projection, like she was so convinced that I was cheating because on some level she knew that Brandon was capable of infidelity, and she was projecting that onto me. I've also been thinking about how toxic Patricia's relationship with Brandon is, and how her overprotectiveness and her inability to accept me as Brandon's wife created an environment where Brandon felt like he could do no wrong, and where he didn't have to take responsibility for his actions. I've realized that Brandon's affair was not just about him being attracted to Ashley, but was also about him having a dysfunctional relationship with his mother, and not having healthy boundaries. I've been thinking about Ashley, the woman Brandon cheated with, and I've been wondering if she knew that Brandon was married, and if she felt any guilt about being involved with a married man. I found Ashley on social media, and I sent her a message telling her that I knew about the affair, and that Brandon and I were getting divorced. Ashley responded and said that she was sorry, and that she didn't know Brandon was married at first, but that by the time she found out, she had already developed feelings for him. Ashley said that Brandon had told her that his marriage was over and that he was planning to leave me, and that she believed him. I don't know if I believe Ashley's story, but I also don't think it really matters, because Brandon is the one who made vows to me, and he's the one who betrayed me. About 3 weeks ago, I found out through a mutual friend that Brandon and Ashley are no longer together, and that Ashley ended things with Brandon after she found out that he had lied to her about the status of our marriage. I felt a small sense of satisfaction knowing that Brandon lost both me and Ashley, and that he's now dealing with the consequences of his actions. Brandon has tried to contact me several times to ask if we can talk, and if there's any chance of reconciliation, but I've told him that I'm not interested, and that I'm moving forward with the divorce. The divorce process has been contentious, because Brandon is trying to get a larger share of our assets, and because he's trying to avoid paying spousal support. My attorney has been fighting for me, and has been making sure that I get what I'm entitled to in the divorce settlement. I've been thinking about what I want my life to look like after the divorce, and I know that I want to focus on myself and on rebuilding my sense of self-worth and my ability to trust. I've been spending more time with friends and family who support me, and I've been pursuing hobbies and interests that I had neglected during my marriage. I've also been working on setting better boundaries in my relationships, and on recognizing red flags earlier so that I don't end up in another toxic situation. I've been thinking about dating again eventually, but I'm not ready yet, because I need to heal from this betrayal and I need to make sure that I'm in a healthy place emotionally before I open my heart to someone new. When I do start dating again, I know that I'm going to be much more careful about the kind of person I choose to be with, and I'm going to make sure that they have healthy relationships with their family, and that they're capable of setting boundaries. I've been thinking about other people who might be in similar situations, who might have in-laws who are hostile toward them, or who might be with partners who don't defend them, or who might be dealing with infidelity, and I want to tell them that they deserve better. I want to tell them that if their partner's family is treating them poorly, and their partner isn't setting boundaries or defending them, that's a major red flag, and it's likely to cause serious problems in the relationship. I want to tell them that if they have a gut feeling that their partner is cheating, they should trust that instinct and investigate, because often our intuition picks up on things that our conscious mind doesn't want to acknowledge. And I want to tell them that if they discover that their partner has been unfaithful, they have every right to leave, and they shouldn't let anyone pressure them into staying in a relationship where they've been betrayed. I want to tell them that sometimes the people who are most vocal about accusing others of bad behavior are the ones who are actually engaging in that behavior themselves, or who are enabling it in their loved ones. And I want to tell them that they are not responsible for their partner's choices, and that if their partner cheats, that's a reflection of their partner's character, not a reflection of their worth. Thank you for reading my story. And if you've been through something similar, if you've had in-laws who were hostile toward you, if you've discovered that your partner was cheating while you were being accused of infidelity, if you've dealt with a partner who wouldn't set boundaries with their family, or if you've had to rebuild your life after a betrayal, I would love to hear how you dealt with it and where you are now. I'm still in the process of finalizing my divorce, still healing from the betrayal, still working on rebuilding my sense of self, and still processing the complicated emotions that come with the end of a marriage, but I'm hopeful about the future, and I'm grateful that I discovered the truth before I wasted any more years of my life with someone who didn't value me or respect me.